Hey! How's it going, Joey? Okay, man, I have no plans whatsoever on this except for a little bit of stuff written, and I'm going to be looking at the screen to read our conversation and what I've written recently. So don't think I'm ignoring you if I look over here for a little bit. So I'm a little more philosophical in nature and in learning. You're a little more scientific. For this, over the past month, I've turned to a number of people to look into, and actually, one of them been a fan of for a long time. Wonderful, wonderful guy, Sam Harris. He's got a lot of good insights on it. I've been listening with Charles Murray. He's an interesting cat. They've had a great conversation. There is a debate, Ezra Klein and Sam Harris, which resembles our debate in a lot of ways. And then there is a Brett Weinstein, who has probably influenced me the most in my most recent studies into it, trying to look at it in the scientific way, which is not my field, so forgive me if I say stupid things like, say, phenotype when I meant to say genotype, right? I usually use simpler terms than scientific ones. So I'm going to try to readdress my arguments in a different way. First, I'd like to start off saying I completely and totally agree with test bias and stereotype threat. I am in no way saying they do not exist or they do not matter. As I said before, Shaq's the one who taught me about stereotype threat in a way, or is it or cultural bias. So, you know, I mean, these are ideas and beliefs I've held for a long time. They're nothing new to me. But that being said, I don't think they're all there is to the story. And both genetically and it would be genetics and the phenotypes and extended phenotypes. And when talking about extended phenotypes, my speciality is memetics, which I'm fully willing to admit is a belief system that we don't really have much true evidence for. I would say that the evolution itself has more evidence for it. I would say that gravitational theory and things like that have more evidence for them, even though, you know, gravitational theory is a lot like some of these in which, you know, they're like IQ. Gravitational IQ would be a lot alike because, you know, neither one of them we can't prove how they work, how it happens, or why. But we can make predictions based on the little bit of data we get out of it. But anyway, I digress. Stereotype threat, man, like I said, it's obvious, and I don't think that I would be very surprised at the data that you've gotten out of it. I've read many studies on it, and I realize that, you know, it it doesn't matter who you are, and that's kind of my point, is that everybody goes through this, you know, like, I mean, just use your empathy for a moment and put yourself in the state of, let's just say, a white cisgender male today, and think of all the negativity you get. You know, how much is that going to affect an SAT score in a university that's mostly left-leaning where you catch that every day, right? I mean, that argument can be made both ways. So that's not a factor that you can contribute just to one or just the other and say that, you know, it's going to have this negative effect on their test scores. As a matter of fact, like right now, universities culturally are more accepting of blacks than they are of cis white men. And now I'm not saying that all universities are swinging hardcore left, right? But they're most generally following the guidelines that I've talked about, and I don't want to get into all that right now. That it's forced acceptance of blacks that have not scored as well, or Latinos, minorities, you know, with the exception of like Jews and Asians and things like that. Okay, and I'm not arguing against it. I'm for it, but I think it needs to be something that lessens over the years. But anyway, I digress. So stereotype threat Yeah, it happens, but also personal choice, mimetics, genetics, they play a role in that too. And I myself believe that those factors have much more of an impact. Now, test bias. Yes, okay. When it comes to test bias, how to put it? Mimetics and genetics, what we would refer to as maybe natural selection, all right? The, how does Dawkins put it? The replicators have preferences, right? And that's how we evolved from lesser beings to upper beings, right? That's how we went from single-celled organisms to what we are now, which is basically a walking, talking zoo that's autonomous, and yet, yeah, it's very, very weird to think about how we operate. So, genetics and mimetics had the bias in the first place. And the IQ test is biased towards, well, I wouldn't even say it's biased towards, it is designed to find that bias, detect that bias, right? And I mean, like, when you start talking about it's culturally biased or it's racially biased, you have a lot of trouble because, I don't know if you've looked at one of the maps of the IQ test and looked into the data of where scores what, who scores what, and how they've done over time. It's really, really interesting to look at because it's like it can't be culturally because like when you look at Japan, China and places like that, we had, we're almost polar opposites when it comes to our cultural makeup when you look at us, say, 100 years ago. But as IQ tests start becoming important ways of life, good predictors of how well someone may do if they apply themselves in a field and are not corrupted, right? Even if they are corrupted, if your IQ's high, you're good at corruption, right? So back to test bias, corruption. There are certain areas that you can make the theory that they are either genetically or mimetically deficient to other areas. And I've been using mimetics a lot. I don't know if you're quite aware of that, but the simplest way to explain it is think genetics and then apply that to ideas. Like memes are just the simplest form of that, right? Tiny, tiny little ideas. Might not like him, but President Trump is a master of this sort of thing. He wraps up big ideas into really small words so that the person can perceive it how they want to instead of having an actually solid message that just rings out completely and totally. Anyway, test bias is just trying, it's pointing out that it's trying to find the people that have been proven by IQ to be able to do well in the world. And, and obviously that's what the test is for. That's like saying that tests for gravitational patterns in the universe have a bias. Well, yes, they have a bias. They have a bias towards finding what is there, what is measurable. But does it matter racially? It looks like it may. Great parts of the Middle East, Africa, and South America all have very low IQs on average. This doesn't mean that the smartest person in the world can come from anywhere. It doesn't matter. That's the beautiful part of it. That's one of the things that I like about the research that we've been doing. All right, so we that definitely puts in a saving grace that when eugenics had proven that this existed in a way back then, they went the wrong route morally with it. That's where I talk about fact versus truth. So, let me try to find the words here. This is very much a scary thing, this IQ test. It is a way of measuring people in which it looks like some people may be racially deficient when it comes to intelligence. It's not just African Americans, it's basically all of Africa that's not got a decent population of whites, and even the ones that do have a decent population of whites, you wind up seeing low IQs. Now, it doesn't matter if they're white, no, they could be Asian, they could be Ashkenazi Jewish, they could be from all over the place, and bring intelligence with them. Now, again, the question is it memetics or is it genetics? Is it parasites infecting the young and, tearing apart their ability to build the cognitive tools needed to have an intelligence, So, yeah, again, I really think test bias is completely and totally true, but it's a bad argument. The bias was natural selection, and we just don't know exactly why, how, to what effect, and if race mixing will alter this problem, or if what they need is rule of law in a different way, because a lot of them got rule of law, but we're talking about decent rule of law, and a lot of these countries do not have that. Now, there's the argument that once an IQ drops below, I think it's like 90-something%, that democracy, or, a representative democracy cannot be sustained anymore, because you have to have a certain IQ level to even understand these ideas, and I think there's a certain level of truth in that. But at the same time, I think that by having a chaotic and unstable set of ideas guiding people, you can also cause it. So it could be genetics, it could just be tyranny, it could be a lot of things here that's causing this divide. Now, African Americans in America scoring lower, that could definitely be memetics. They've not had the means. That's why we have affirmative action. That's why we have equal opportunity, is to hand them the means. That's why I support these sort of things, is to hand them the means. It could be memetics. They've not had as long of a time to genetically adapt to the memetics of learning and living in a society of such a way, right? It could be that being able to live in a society takes multiple generations for the genetics to alter to be able to understand those type of memetics. It's sort of like language. First generation immigrants usually keep a thick accent unless they've practiced it long beforehand, especially if they're older when they move over, right? But their kids will probably have somewhere a mixture in between the same accents. So genetically and memetically, they're still holding, both cultures in their brains. And then fourth, fifth, sixth, by that time, they're American, or they're Chinese, or they're wherever they're living, right? So, that's my theory. That's my personal theory, is that genetics and memetics are an inner working set of tools that if you don't have the genetics, you can't understand the memetics. And that goes both ways. That's why there was such a huge difference between the natives and the first Europeans that landed. That's why the Aztec Empire was started after the beginnings of the University of Oxford University. It wasn't that they were racially, I don't think, we have adaptability, so yeah, that's just what we do, man. We adapt, and I believe we're at the first point of being able to measure intelligence, and my hopes are that over the next few hundred years, we're going to see an IQ boom across racial lines. So I don't think this test is racially biased myself. I think it is genetically and memetically biased. And we're going to get over here and look at stuff for a little bit. I'm done talking about that, I believe. Sorry for this long pause. I'm going to try to edit this thing. Oh, my mouse is over here. I'm going to try to edit this just a little bit. But I don't know if I'm going to be any good at that, so you might just have to sit through some boring parts, Joey. It's just like any time you listen to me on the typing, read my words. I'm very boring, but yeah, I'm mustard, as my friend said. And again, I'd like to say, forgive me if I make any mistakes in terminology. It's not my field. Philosophy, politics, that's more of my field. I love science. I think it's great. I do a lot of looking into it, but I was never really schooled in that. And it's important that there's education in it. Don't get me wrong, the greatest scientists in the world can come from an unschooled. I mean, they could just have a great understanding, born with it, and they can come from, some place like the middle of Africa where there's, nothing but war and torment, and there's no memetics to be able to structure that sort of thing. But at the same time, an education in science is a valuable thing, and I envy that. No matter how much shit I give you over your psychology degree and your field, I just worry about groupthink with any sort of field. They're all subject to them. Anyway, so we've gotten past that, and yeah. So we're going to get on to, I believe. Yep, your comments. So, as to your comments, let's see here. Yeah, I mentioned that I probably wouldn't be surprised about the one of your theories and stereotype threat. Now, yeah, blacks are often portrayed as athletic, cool, musical, which needs intelligence. Do you have any? I love music. I cry to my music. I dance like a man on fire, man. I just love to dance. It's always throughout my life been the one thing that's kept me sane. And I used to be so shut off, I hardly talk to anyone. I can get very social anxiety. That's why I got good at typing on the internet. I could have these conversations without feeling so much anxiety. So like music and art are one of the only things that really, really saved me in a lot of ways. Other people's intelligence have altered my life in such a way that I feel that I live with morals and I was guided by them, right? Much like, religious people turn to their scripture and the things in their life that, reaffirm the scripture. It's just like the same way. You got to be intelligent to do this to somebody, especially someone of a decent intelligence. I mean, I'm not like Einstein, and I don't even think I'm anywhere near that, but you got a college degree and you have a hard time putting me in my place, and I've taught you a thing or two, I'm sure, as you've taught me a number of things. So back to yes, there's Oprah, there's Morgan Freeman. I'm going to read off of here. One of my favorites, Thomas Sowell, black economist. He's known as a, hope you don't mind if I smoke here. I'm trying to quit. Actually, I'm going to hit my vape. I'm trying to quit. Becca's been riding my ass about that. She's a good girl. So, Thomas Sowell, wonderful guy. He's Uncle Tom, and he's racist against black people, even though he's black. Brilliant man. He went into economics as a kind of a radical leftist, not quite militant back in the day, like, the Black Panthers type of stuff. He wanted to educate himself. He was more of like a Marxist, He was going to go in and take out the bourgeoisie of the white man, and then he got educated. and don't get me wrong, there's plenty of black economists on the left and things like that. I'm not saying he's, the one who's right, okay? But I love him for his principles. He has his beliefs when it comes to politics, and he has his education when it comes to the economy, and he sticks to his guns on what he believes. He's swapped. He is a strong conservative. He teaches in UC California, I think, or somewhere in the San Francisco, Oakland area. And, they can't put his name on his door because it gets defaced. So, there's plenty of black intellectuals out there. It's just not all of them are wanted. Another good example of that is Larry Eller and Ben Carson. There's Bill Cosby. Despite all the negativity that has come to light in the days, early Bill Cosby is one of my role models, man. I loved Bill Cosby. I love how clean he could be and still be funny. That takes good, high level of intelligence. It's easy to be dirty and be funny, especially when you're dealing with the general public. He was so clean and so funny. Brain damage! Dude, you get mad at his family. He's down in the kitchen. He's cooking. He's like, I don't want to be cooking. My wife, she's a stick and raw. I don't want to be doing it. Oh, and he's throwing the pots around. He's throwing the pans around, and he gets the eggs. Oh, you got to be careful with the eggs, Dude, Bill Cosby was wonderful for me. Great, intelligent black role model. Let's see here. Shaq. Dennis Rodman. Now, while I would argue that Dennis Rodman is nowhere near what one needs to be considered to be, like, say, an intellectual, he was paraded around by the left as being one. And that kind of leads me into a point where, there's some media still left in which blacks aren't overly represented, but there's a lot of media in which they're overly represented or equally represented. There was actually the debate about that with Matt Damon. You can find them probably talking about it, or he talks about on the show. You got to have racial equality on the show, but not necessarily behind the scenes, right? And this is them trying to say, merit behind the scenes and belief on the scenes. But anyway, so there's definitely a lot of media that's portraying positive ideas and positive beliefs about blacks. You're part of it. I'm part of it. We carry this belief structure. So, just as much as, say, someone who is black can turn to the negatives, they could turn to the positives. It's just up to them what they want to turn to, how they want to feel in their mind, just as it is with you and I. You and I are living in a certain world, and we've got things that make us sad, and we've got things that make us happy, and it affects who we are, but we make those decisions ourselves. If Frederick Douglass had allowed himself to be prone to these things, I wouldn't have a fucking hero. Frederick Douglass is one of the most amazing people in the world. Probably the first real black intellectual. The man was amazing. I mean, how can you have a better hero than Frederick Douglass? Except for maybe Thomas Jefferson. It's funny that that era threw out some of the best men that history has to offer. Just love it. So, anyway, Colin Kaepernick, how many people feel like he understands the world well enough to do the right thing? And most people on the left feel like intelligence is important when doing the right thing. You often hear that when they put down, the dumb Republicans, the stupid, undereducated people trying to make decisions. I don't know if you were aware or not, but the richest, most educated people voted for Clinton. So who does that leave voting for Trump? And that point, it's been hammered into the ground. So, just saying, man, all of us are going through some sort of sense like that. Jesus, I've been going on for 23 minutes. I didn't think I could do this. I felt shy of the camera before today. I thank you for saying yes. I hope I can edit this thing down. Okay, so, Malcolm X. Kanye. Everyone calls him a genius. I don't think he's a genius, but I think he's kind of bright, and he's a devil's advocate. I understand what he means when he says 400 years of slavery is a choice. Is it completely true or a fact? No, but it's a perception that makes sense.